and welcome back. All right, I hope you all had a good start to this new year, however, wherever, and whenever that has happened for you. But we're in a new year. We can feel it. It's in the air. Once again, we gather to pray, to reflect, and to share on Saint Joseph, a man of many gifts and graces. And we're grateful to each of our presenters so far for carrying us through this special year of Saint Joseph. Sister Mary Pellegrino is our presenter today, but I'll give you a little bit more about her in a few minutes. As I've said before, no one can do anything like this alone. That this series is a joint effort among the Vincentian Center for Spirituality and Justice at St. John's University, through the graciousness of Father Pat Griffin, whom we all know, the Diocese of Rockville Center and Sister Pat Moran in the Vicar for Religious office there, and then in my office through the Diocese of Brooklyn. It has been a team effort all along, and with the help of the Council of Religious from the Diocese of Brooklyn, we make it happen every time just for you. So we're a good team. So now as we begin, I ask you to turn to your prayer sheet, and we'll enter into our prayer together. Everyone has been muted except the speakers. So if you feel free to share at home and to pray the prayers aloud, that would be fine, okay? So now you can join us at home with the responses, and we enter into this time of prayer and reflection about Saint Joseph and the lessons in love that he will teach us.
Joseph was not set apart. His life was steeped in daily dealings with the world around him. It was far from the idyllic existence we may sometimes imagine. Joseph was a woodworker, a neighborhood craftsman who made furniture, carved other objects, and spent time apprenticing his son in the same trade. Like many believers, Joseph walked with God as a family man, laboring in his shop and living at home. He combined prayer, hard work, and the responsibilities of being a husband and father. Scripture describes him as a just man, one who observed the law faithfully, who was upright and righteous in his relationships. Joseph was a man of faith, attuned to the inspirations of God's Spirit in his life. He was an ordinary man who followed the path of his life wherever God led him. Joseph served God faithfully and lived true to his beliefs.
Saint Joseph, help us to grow in your spirit. Teach us to live the ordinary with extraordinary justice, love, and faithfulness.
A reading from the book of Micah. This is what God asks of you, only this: to act justly, to love tenderly, to walk humbly with your God.
Saint Joseph, help us to grow in your spirit. Teach us to live the ordinary with extraordinary justice, love, and faithfulness.
Pope John Paul II says, Saint Joseph was a just man, a tireless worker, the upright guardian of those entrusted to his care. May he always guard, protect, and enlighten families and those who care for others.
Saint Joseph, help us to grow in your spirit. Teach us to live the ordinary with extraordinary justice, love, and faithfulness. It's my pleasure now to introduce to us Sister Mary Pellegrino. Sister Mary is a sister of St. Joseph of Baden, Pennsylvania. From 2008 to 2015, Sister Mary served as congregational moderator of her community. And from 2015 to 2018, Mary also served in the presidency of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, LCWR, in the United States. In both of these roles, Mary worked to support, encourage, and promote the ongoing renewal of religious life in the face of unprecedented challenges and changes in the church, in American society, and the global community. Prior to serving in congregational leadership, Mary served in vocation formation ministries for her congregation, as well as parish and campus ministries, spiritual direction, and retreat direction. Currently, Mary assists leaders and religious communities in planning for the future through the lens of mission in her role with the Religious Institute Service Group of Plant Moran. Over these years, Mary has written and presented extensively for national and international audiences on various topics related to religious life. In addition to a BA in journalism, Mary holds a master's degree in Christian spirituality and a certificate in spiritual and retreat direction from Creighton University, along with a master's degree in religious education from Fordham University. So along with all of these credentials, Mary also comes to us as a woman religious, someone who has walked the walk and also has talked the talk and led us through some very, very challenging times. So I'm delighted that Mary is with us all the way from the West Coast this morning to share with us on St. Joseph. So Mary, 1,000 welcomes.
Thank you, Mary Ann. And thank you really to all of the hosting groups and the sponsoring groups. I think this is the first real kind of diocesan and collaborative effort that I've seen to celebrate the year of Joseph. So I'm just really happy and thrilled to be a part of it. And thank you for that introduction as well. As Mary Ann noted, I'm a sister of St. Joseph from Baden, Pennsylvania, which is near Pittsburgh. And I'm coming to you from Seal Beach, which is part of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Orange on the West Coast. It's one of their really lovely homes at the ocean. And had I known actually about this Seal Beach house when I was discerning entering Baden, I probably would have moved to Orange. So there's really nothing like this in Pittsburgh. You know, if you've been there to Western Pennsylvania, it's pretty much of a rust belt. So this opportunity to really come to you through, just another one of our cousins, it's just a great opportunity. And I want to also acknowledge the Sisters of St. Joseph of Brentwood, who are widely considered in the history of Sisters of St. Joseph in the United States. They are the mother community of Baden. So I'm thrilled to be on the call with some of my mothers. So thank you. And actually, as I was really toying with what is it that would be meaningful in a reflection this morning about St. Joseph with a group of primarily, women religious or people really connected already with the person of Joseph. And I began to really trace my own relationship with Joseph and how that has been deepened and really shaped some of my experience as a woman religious through a congregation of the Sisters of St. Joseph. So I'd like to share some personal reflections. So at any rate, what I'd like to do is share some personal reflections. And then also, just as I do that, I just want to invite each of you to kind of allow yourself to really trace the roots of your relationship with Joseph, and how and when did he appear in your life and in your spirituality? And if he appeared at all, because part of my story is he never really appeared until much later when I was an adult. And so I want to offer some personal reflections and then open it up for some conversation. And I will say that I think that the Sisters of St. Joseph on this in this call today will find some of this familiar. And so I would really hope to hear also of your reflections as well. So I, a little bit of background that might be helpful. I was raised in a very active Catholic parish in kind of the early years of the renewal in the late 60s and early 70s. And so my family was very, very active. And I came to know our sisters when I was in elementary school. They taught at my school. And then when I went to high school, I was taught by, I was at a high school where there were a variety of religious communities teaching. And so I was exposed really early on to the charism that was awakened in me. And at the same time, I really, while I kind of knew of Joseph and understood, conceptually the Holy Family and his role, I just never really had a relationship with Joseph or Mary for that matter. I look back and I think that they just were quite plastic to me. They existed as little statues, they existed as paintings, but they really did not exist as people. And I don't know that any saint really existed as a person for me at that time. So when I was really feeling drawn to religious life, I knew that I was drawn to the community that taught me. It really had nothing to do with St. Joseph. It had everything to do with my junior high English teacher. That's really what it was. It was seeing her and the other sisters interact with one another and the way they really embraced life. And they really entered into the life of their students and their families, and teaching was kind of like a side. The real work was just the relationship. And so I knew right away that was the community that I was drawn to. And so I entered that community, and that's really when I began to probably appropriate more as an adult, an understanding of church, an understanding of church history, an understanding of religious life and how it is that it evolved. And during those early years in community, what I learned was that we really did not have access to our foundation stories, to our spirit and spirituality, to our writings, until after the Second Vatican Council. And so what I learned is that at that time, this would have been in the late 60s, early 70s, all of the Sisters of St. Joseph in the United States could trace their history back to our foundation in southern France, in Le Puy-en-Velay, which is a small village in southern France, to the first 6 sisters who did not know one another. Most of them were illiterate. Only one of them was literate. One was a teenager. And they came to know one another through the spiritual guidance of our founder, Jean-Pierre Médaille, who was a Jesuit, and he was an itinerant spiritual director. And he was the spiritual director for each of these women who did not know one another. But he heard a similar longing and a similar spirituality and a similar call among those 6 women, and brought them together and said, basically, you should be talking to one another. And that is how our community was founded. So that was the mid 17th century. And the patronage of Saint Joseph as a figure in the church was just emerging at that time. He was very much a hidden figure, and he still is, I think, to some extent. But his patronage among groups in the church was just beginning to emerge. And Madai really placed the patronage of those first 6 women under Saint Joseph. And what we learned in the period of renewal, when we were able to have our documents translated into English for the first time from the French, what we learned is that in those early documents that Madai wrote, he consecrated that first early community, the Sisters of Saint Joseph, under the patronage of Joseph, but he consecrated them to what we call the 2 Trinities, the Trinity of Father, Son, and Spirit. It's the uncreated Trinity, and the created Trinity of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. And in our spirituality and the spirituality of the Sisters of Saint Joseph, there's a virtue that is associated with each of those persons of the 2 Trinities. And the virtue that we associate with Joseph is the virtue of cordial charity. And so, I want to break that open for us this morning, because when I came across that when I was in the novitiate, I thought, well, that's pretty odd, cordial charity, because it just sounds nice. You know, it sounds like that's just nice. Not really, didn't really have a meaning for me. But what did have a meaning for me were cordials. So when I'm Italian, and I remember that at Christmas, if there's any Italians, on this call, like we did the 7 fishes, that was Christmas Eve. And then Christmas morning, we had a tradition where we would all, no matter what age, would take a shot of anisette. And when I was old enough to drink coffee, that anisette would go in the coffee. And then slowly and slowly, the anisette would just be the shot. And so if you've ever done a shot of a liqueur or a shot of a cordial, you know that drink just slowly goes down, and you can feel the movement. I can still feel the movement the first time I had anisette, that first cordial that just warmed me from the inside out. And then within about 5 minutes, I could feel my limbs tingling. It's simply something that you digest in a way that is unforgettable. And that's what's meant by cordial in the 17th century parlance. It wasn't just a way to describe being nice, but a cordial was a medicinal liqueur. It was believed to have healing qualities because it could invigorate and reinvigorate. And so when we associate that virtue that we call cordial charity to Joseph, I think in many ways we are describing what is the extraordinary nature of this ordinary man, is that his love can be nothing but invigorating, that Joseph's cordial charity, his invigorating love, is intended to heal. It's intended to be an elixir, a tonic for the heart. And so Sisters of St. Joseph really take that on in a way that becomes a measure for how it is that we express our love. Is it healing? Is it invigorating? Is it medicinal? And to really consider what that is like for in today's society and in today's culture. What is it like to be a healing presence, to be an invigorating toxin for the heart, tonic for the heart, not toxin for the heart. So that's one of the ways that I have found that I grew in a relationship with Joseph. He somehow was no longer plastic to me. He still was quite hidden in that whole image of the Holy Family, quite hidden, did not speak. It's not a word that we hear from him. And yet, the decisions and the choices he made are the decisions and choices that in many ways created the possibility for Jesus to grow into the person that he was to be. So language means a lot. So that image of cordial charity, particularly for Sisters of St. Joseph, is significant. I want to acknowledge too that in some of our literature, we ascribe another kind of equally interesting description of the virtue that we associate with Joseph. And so in addition to cordial charity, we sometimes speak of sincere charity. And again, sincere, that whole, sincere, what does that really mean? Is it just being nice in a different way? But when you break open the word sincere, it comes from the Latin phrase sincere. And the Latin phrase sincere means without wax. Again, a really fascinating understanding of language, for me at least. So what does it mean when we describe something as sincere or someone as sincere, when the root of the word is without wax? Like what does that even mean? So again, in the 17th, 18th century, and you'll find this still today, I believe, that you will find authentic and flawless marble will be stamped with the word sincere. And that's an indication that the marble itself is flawless, that there is no wax in that marble. And that's an indication to artisans that that is authentic and good marble to work with. Because in the 17th, 18th century, and perhaps before, there were some marble quarrymen of maybe ill repute that would try to pass off marble that was chipped or that had flaws, would try to pass that off as marble that was flawless. And the way they would do that, it was that they would fill in the flaws and the chips with wax. And that wax would mold and it would take on the characteristics and it would look like marbling. And so the really artisans of repute and suppliers of repute really wanted to find a way to ensure that their products and their quality were not going to be associated with lesser quality products. So they came up with the concept of stamping their wax, verifying or stamping their marble and verifying its authenticity with the phrase sincere. And so what that means is that this is authentic. And so when we associate authentic love authentic charity with Joseph, and we talk about sincere charity, that's really what we're talking about. There's an authenticity. There's nothing fake. It might be quiet. It might be understated, but the love of Joseph is not fake. It's authentic. It's real. And so again, for Sisters of St. Joseph and our associates and agrégés, that virtue of and that understanding of the way Joseph loved is part of what shapes how it is that we try to love and be in the world authentically, not fake. And so when you bring together the meaning, the deeper meaning of cordial and sincere, you really have, for me at least, it's where I found a relationship with Joseph, where he came kind of alive for me, and really out of the shadows that were cast by Mary and Joseph, or Mary and Jesus. You know, that it's that healing, medicinal, invigorating, authentic love that really helped to create the conditions, I think, in the home of the Holy Family, for God's dream, for Jesus, Mary, and Joseph to be made real in their love, and in their relationship, and really created, I think, the conditions from a human perspective to understand how it is that Jesus became. How could he become the person that we see as an adult? And I think it was what happened in the home, and what makes that family holy, is the ordinariness, that quiet, understated, and yet invigorating love that Joseph brought to that experience. So, so that's kind of, that's really how, where this invitation to actually reflect on Joseph brought me, was as a reminder of who that person is for me, and how language matters, and the meaning of cordial and sincere, and the hiddenness that we think about Joseph, that Joseph is not a very he's not a very visible figure in Scripture, and yet he played an extraordinary role. So with that, I really would just like to open this up to pause, and just invite you to really, take a few moments and be in touch with, who is Joseph for you, and how did he become who he is for you, and also I'm happy if there are Sisters of St. Joseph, or associates or agrégés, or those familiar with the spirituality. I would love to just hear your own observations about cordial charity or sincere charity. I think, Marian, we would put these in the chat.
Yes, we will. Yeah. So if anyone wants to, maybe we'll take just a moment and let what Mary said kind of sink into us, and find that place in us where cordial charity and sincere, authentic charity resonated. I know it kind of like, ooh, it gave me a little spark when you said that. But for us to take that, because that's the word that God is speaking to us. And then if you'd like to just comment or reflect back to Mary, or ask her a question, we're going to use the chat feature. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the little chat icon. And if you click that, it will be a way for you to type in your words, and then I'll just relay those to Mary and give her a chance to respond. I was very struck by how Joseph became a person for you. You know, that sense that he was no longer a plastic. I think I read and I was like, oh yeah, all these plastic statues of people we didn't even know had names, you know, but that sense that this statue represented somebody who led a real life and an important life in of course, the life of Jesus. I'm always fascinated about the home life that Joseph and Mary must have had with Jesus, for him to have the qualities and the strength to do what he did, you know, and you touched on that, but I don't know if you want to just say a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Marianne. Because I would often think, you know, what is it that went on in that home? Because, you know, Jesus was fully human, and you know, so were, you know, Joseph and Mary. And so how is it that, you know, what had to happen to shape Jesus' life for him to be able to grow into and mature into his fullness in the way that he did? And so when I began to really understand and kind of toy with, you know, sincere and cordial, I realized that, you know, that love was the way Joseph also interacted with the boy Jesus, you know, with Mary. We don't hear a word in scripture.
No.
But I think that there had to be something incredibly formative, in the best sense of the word, that Joseph and Mary brought to that home. And you know, and that I think is some of the mystery of it. And I think too, I appreciate what you're saying about the statues. You know, we always had a statue of Joseph. You know, in fact, I still have my parents' statue of Joseph with a chip in his neck. You know, so it wasn't like he wasn't around. He just wasn't real.
Yeah.
They just weren't real to me. And I think now I was really touched by the video that was shown at the beginning of this, because I think what I understand now is those images that I grew up with were simply, they looked more like Mary. Just, you know, she probably looked much more like my best friend Judy, who was Irish, than she looked like a Middle Eastern young woman.
Yeah.
And so what I come to as an adult is understanding that images matter, and that how we imagine Joseph or Jesus or Mary in an authentic way really does matter. So yeah, but we had a lot of statues, but nothing was very real.
Yeah, you know, it was just part of your culture. It was there.
Right.
Exactly. All right, we have a couple of chats from Karen Kavanagh, who's a sister of St. Joseph. She says, I find myself wanting to look up the definition of cordiality and charity. I think of cordiality as a tender but strong way of being. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There is a strength to that meaning of cordial as a tonic and an elixir. It's something that invigorates and gives strength. So I think oftentimes, and I wonder if this is also particularly for women. I think oftentimes we don't associate those really active expressions of strength with love, because of the way we're conditioned to think about love. And so I think for me, that is another way that Joseph becomes much more real to me.
Mhm.
Is that that gives the permission. We are sisters of Saint Joseph, and we are to love in that way, in very strong and invigorating and authentic ways.
Right. So there's an inbuilt challenge just in
Yeah.
the name that we bear.
Yeah.
Whatever community, for sure.
Mhm.
Sister Alice Burns, who's a Dominican, says, it strikes me that charity is not sincere might be condescending.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. Because I have to say there's a bit of a conversation going on right now. I think about charity in the broadest, not just among religious, but I think in the culture. And I think it is about this. There is something about the historical understandings or expressions of charity, as I will give from my largesse, which is a bit of a condescending way. It's somehow giving those of us in power or who have more will kind of dole out something that we have to those who don't. And they typically don't because we've taken more. So there's a lot of conversation now about the difference between charity and justice. And charity that is not authentic, that really doesn't even understand its roots, I think it does border on being insincere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that authentic
Mhm.
center, right? This from Mary Walsh, having had the opportunity to spend time reflecting on cordial and sincere, I grow in awareness that Joseph shows a way of being.
That's so true, Mary. Hello. But it is a way of being, where there is a level of at any time that our being moves into action, but it really is fundamentally a posture and a disposition, and an understanding of ourselves and the world around us that kind of shapes how we are, and kind of is formative in the way, perhaps in the way that Jesus's home life was formative for him. So it is about a way of being, because what we express in the world can't be anything other than reflecting of our way of being.
This is Helen Carney from Brentwood.
Oh, hi, Helen.
Nice to have you with us, Helen. Very taken with the images of cordial and sincere charity. Their power for me resides in the idea that Joseph practiced these in real time and challenges when his plans were changed and he responded to protect and nourish Jesus and Mary. He invigorated life so that they could thrive in the midst of life-threatening conditions.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that, Helen. It's so true. I think that for many of us, our virtue really doesn't show up until it's really needed. There's a dormancy about that. But, while we don't hear Joseph speak in scripture, we see the effects of his, the choices that he makes. We see and he's making, I think again, scripture kind of really, if a statue kind of plasticizes our saints, I think a scripture sanitizes the story. And so we find really sanitized stories that always have a good ending, but the reality is that they were in life-threatening circumstances. And if Joseph had another, Joseph's approach and his way of being is what helped them to navigate those life-threatening circumstances. And as a whole, then we see how his love was life-giving and invigorating and healing. So it's not just in each act, but it's also overall. which I think is what Mary or what Helen, what you were kind of observing there.
Right, right, great. And Diane Morgan, who's a Dominican sister, says, in recent years, I have found myself praying to Joseph during Advent.
Mm.
The first time I realized we had no spoken words from Joseph in scripture really struck me. Silent but faithful, discerning, and open to God in his life for the benefit of Mary and Joseph.
Wow, that's beautiful, Diane. So true, because Joseph does show up for us in Advent, and where we see the story, we see Mary's words. Eventually, we see Jesus's words, but we don't hear anything from Joseph, and I think that is what really helps to contribute to his hiddenness in such a way, in some ways, and yet. What we do see is his fidelity, his capacity to really have his life and his hopes and dreams suspended for others. And this is really where we see that, how we've come to speak about Joseph as a just man, where, his action and his decision to take Mary into his home, to continue that relationship after she was pregnant. What we sometimes forget is that he had the right to really have her killed. And he chose not to exercise that right. And whether he was brokenhearted, angry, whatever, he chose not to exercise that right. And he then created the condition for really bringing the salvation that we see today. Yeah. And so all of that again is the invigorating, healing, authentic experience that we see what Joseph grappled with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You've mentioned a couple of times the fidelity, the fidelity of Joseph as his person, but I often like to put him too in the wider context. Like they were part of that Anahuim community that prayed for the coming of the Messiah. So Mary and Joseph both were steeped in their own religious tradition there, and that I'd like to think of them as part of that community so that, it's the Holy Family, which is this little nugget,
right,
but set within a wider faith community that prayed the same things, and how much Joseph's and Mary, of course, faith and the expression of faith in their temple worship and all of that also shaped Jesus's appreciation of the tradition and the history and his responsible place in that, it just a little wider circle to say it's not just the three of them, right, but it's the many of them.
Yes, and I think that's really helpful, Marianne, because I think that we see that and maybe take for granted in scripture the way that the Holy Family was situated within their larger worshiping community, and the larger Jewish community that really did come under a great deal of threat, and also the ways that these kind of marks that we see in Jesus's early life, they really were around the traditions of the worshiping community. Where he's, Mary brings him to temple. The census, all of those, all of those activities that are happening, they really are within this broader social context that you describe, and that broader social context had very clearly defined roles and very significant threats, and so you wonder, wow, how did it even happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did they
Exactly.
not lose their life at some point?
Mhm.
But it's true, because I don't think we can read the scripture outside of the social context that it's in, nor can we interpret its meaning for us outside of our own social context.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, Mary, just listening to you and kind of bringing this all together now, I think what you just said is kind of a challenge to all of us who live within religious communities or affiliated with communities by associates or institutes or just here because they love St. Joseph. But that it's not just this personal relationship with God, which Joseph had, no doubt. However, it's what does that relationship call us to in the wider context for today? Like one thing that I came through, whether you intended it or not, was how this charism lives in you.
Thank you.
It does. It's because you can't speak this freely and passionately about something that's only head knowledge. We can't do it.
Yeah.
This, you imbibe it the way any of us would tell our foundational story and have the same energy, but your expression and your touching into the heart of what it means to be a Joseph person came through so strongly, and how I think each one of us looking back on our histories and our own charism call, there's just one charism in the church for us. And it's for us is the charism of religious life that we've vowed to. And that's supposed to be that living, authentic, cordial presence, however we name it, but it is that authenticity is the key, and I want to say thank you for that, because that's what came through today very strongly. Like this wasn't a made up talk you brushed off from something else. This is your lived experience of Joseph, but how you live it through your community and the traditions and the meaning of what it means to be a sister of St. Joseph. So in the name of all of us, that's just one way of saying thank you so much for being with us and for sharing some information, but more formation, so that we can look and say, where's that sincere love in us? And where is that cordial love? Maybe after this, we'll all go out and have a real cordial.
I think you should all just have a little tonic
I just
and
think,
just feel it, starting from the center and just invigorating all the way out to the extremities.
yeah,
And I because that's what truly that moment of understanding that is really what helped me, Joseph, become real for me.
yes.
And thank you, Marianne. I just appreciate just that last reflection. This invitation actually was a wonderful opportunity for me to really get back in touch with kind of those founding experiences of my relationship with Joseph, and at a time that's now, and not when I was in formation or in the novitiate. So thank you for that.
And thank you again. I'm sure that if I could ask everybody to just clap, you'd see everybody clapping for you to say thank you so much.
Saint Joseph, whose protection is so great, so strong, so prompt before the face of God, I place in you all my interests and desires. Saint Joseph, I trust in your powerful intercession and ask you to continue to obtain for us the spiritual blessings we need and desire to live as the human family of Jesus Christ. May we embrace the presence of God with us as you did in the life of Jesus, and bearing witness to the love, presence, and compassion he learned from you as a father. Saint Joseph, be with us all in this special year. dedicated to you as Father, protector, guide, and teacher. Lead us all to learn from you the power of deep listening to the voice of God in our waking and in our dreaming, so that we may all fulfill the commission of Jesus to be life and love to all in our lives.
So once again, it's been wonderful to be together and share with one another and to be nourished by new insights about Saint Joseph. And just the way he lived and how he taught us lessons of love without saying a word. And again, a thank you to Mary for being with us and sharing so much of herself and helping us to look into Saint Joseph and move him from a plastic statue to a living person, a man of faith, a man of deep love. And again, a big thank you to all of you who prepared today's event, especially Sister Maria Amador and Alexa, who are behind the scenes, but had that technical magical wand that makes this all happen. So thank you very much, Maria and Alexa. And to the Council of Religious, some of whom you've seen today and heard, leading us in prayer. To Father Patrick and his staff at St. John's, Sister Pat Moran, and all the great co-workers and all of you. I mean, we could plan this and nobody would be here, but you're here to share it with us, and we're very grateful. We'll close now with our prayer and our song, Dear St. Joseph, Build Me a Home.